Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How's everybody doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing my next video in my palette roulette series in which I review a palette or two that is in my collection that might also be in your collection. It's not necessarily about the brandest, newest palette out there. It's just about finding use in my products. I utilize them for a series of weeks and then I come back to you and I talk to you about the good, the bad, the ugly, all the things I experienced, show you some eye looks, and then we pull some new palettes and we start all over again, and I hope that you're here for it. Today we will be actually going through these two palettes here, which is of course the Huda Beauty Pretty Grunge palette and the Pat McGrath Mothership 10, I believe, Moonlit Seduction palette. So with that said, I do hope that you stick around. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work as a field leader for Ulta Beauty. I get a lot of education in my position. I'd like to bring you that education here, but ultimately, I'm just out here talking about makeup because I like to talk about makeup. And I'm assuming if you're here, you also like to talk about makeup. So let's do that. Let's just talk about some makeup. All right. So we have two palettes today, 28 shades. So we will likely not do live swatches. I've been kind of doing that a lot lately because it takes so long to do the live swatches, but you will see the swatches in some B-roll that I have for you. You just won't see me swatching them live. All of the swatches are taken over my bare arm, no primer, no anything, and just swatched twice to show impact of the shade with my finger, not with a brush or anything like that. So they are finger swatches, just so that you guys know. You will also see some pictures rolling here throughout the video. As always, I am kind of ashamed to say though that I didn't take as many pictures as I should have because, you know, I went to FLC and I didn't take any pictures of the eye looks that I created while I was at FLC. We're always in such a hurry. It's always like go, 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 do, do, do. And I got the makeup done. We headed downstairs. We went to breakfast. We went to our first, conference session, and I just, by the end of the day, realized that I had forgotten pictures, and that's very sad to me. So there's like 4 days worth of pictures that you're not going to see. I did wear both eyeshadows quite a bit during FLC. The only one I took was this one because it was just easier. It had all the colors that I needed. What I did find was that it was a little bit darker than I would have preferred it to be during that time frame, but it is what it is. So we are going to start actually with the Huda Pretty Grunge palette, and I almost dropped it. Oh my gosh, my heart is a flutter. We're going to start with the Huda Beauty Pretty Grunge, which, like, when this palette showcased, I would have been so sad if I was not able to pick it up. I would love to say this is my aesthetic in eyeshadow. It's not. A color is my aesthetic in eyeshadow, but if I were to be a neutral girly, this would be my aesthetic in eyeshadow. And I love my like Natasha Denona Xenon so dang much, both mini and the big one, that I felt like this one perfectly partnered with it because it is a little more colorful than that, although very much along the same veins. And it didn't compete with it. It also doesn't compete with my Glamlight Chucky palette, which is same vein, only leans more reds and like deeper purples, right? I really loved this palette for that. This is the palette right here. This is the Huda Beauty Pretty Grunge palette, and the Pretty Grunge along the front are mirrored letters. They're not raised by any means. There's some like splotchies all across the packaging, but it isn't like raised. You can feel little bumps here and there. This is a $69 eyeshadow palette with 0.59 ounces of product in it, or 0.03 ounces per pan. It is plastic packaging, much like Huda does with most of her packagings these days. It has a nice like clasp closure, not magnetic. It closes really tight. Travels really well. To be honest, there's nothing that is going to like scooch in between that clasp and the product and get up in there. On the back of it, it just has a sticker placed over the top of all the things with all the information that you need to know about the palette. And it has something on it because something leaked in my travel bag. I'm not sure. I think it was my cleanser. I'm not sure, but I am super happy that this closes tightly like it does, because that cleanser could have destroyed all of the shades inside and nothing got inside the packaging, even though there was obviously something really goopy on the outside of it. This does have a 24-month shelf life and it is cruelty free. The inside of the palette has a very nice size mirror. It does stand up on its own in case you need, you know, a vanity when you do go out of the business or out of your home, but it also lays flat. And this is the color story of this palette. So what I love about this palette is there are 18 shadows in here. 6 of them are shimmers. There is 1 gloss shade, which is this black right here. Then the rest are mattes. So there are 11 mattes in this, which, as you all know, I am a likes my palettes leaning matte kind of girly in the first place. So really was super happy with that. This does have 4.9 stars on the Huda Beauty website with 117 reviews. It has 4.6 stars on Sephora with 1,600 reviews and 4.7 stars on Cult Beauty with 58 reviews. And I would probably put this into the 4.8, 4.9 category. So says me. In my humble opinion, this is definitely worth that 4.8, 4.9. I very rarely will give a palette a 5-star. I don't think that this palette is 5-star because I do think that this gloss is probably unnecessary, to be honest. Although it is very cool, I don't love when there's eyeglasses in a palette for me, and you've heard me say that before with some Huda Beauty palettes that I have in my collection that do have those eyeglasses. I just think that they're unnecessary and a little bit weird. But to each their own, and I know that there's people out there that love it. This is more matte heavy than typically done by Huda, which I am really pretty pleased with. It also doesn't have a whole lot of strange textures in it, which is also something that I'm okay with. Besides the gloss, we have these 2 shades here, which, you know, this one is a little bit more like stark in your face metallic, more of a like a sheet of metallic that goes across your eyes when you put it on. And this one is a little bit more flaky. But other than that, they're just like real everyday shimmer formulas that are really good. These 2 you have a hard time picking up on a brush. They definitely work better with your finger, but the rest of them are fine. Not the really weird, strange textures that we're used to from Huda Beauty, and no pressed glitters in this palette, which I'm so excited about. The gloss does do, you know, double duty, quadruple duty as a really nice like eye base underneath some of these other shades. It also works well as a shadow on its own. It buffs out really nicely and creates a really pretty blend, to be honest. But it also works really well as a glitter glue component for some of the shimmers in this palette. Specifically, I mean, it's not super tacky by any means, but it did work well underneath some of the shimmers in here to like really adhere the shimmer to the skin. What I love about this palette is it is called, you know, Pretty Grunge, and there is a picture on the Huda website, whereas these 9 shadows here are basically the like pretty aspect of this palette, and these 9 shadows over here are basically the grunge aspect of this palette. So you do have the opportunity to get a really pretty, really everyday, really office approachable kind of eye look from it. But you also have the opportunity to glam it up, deepen it up, get really grungy with it, get really dramatic with it, and create some really pretty impactful eye looks. Today I'm wearing mostly the Pat McGrath palette because I utilized every single shade in this through FLC, but I do have this shadow here blended out along the top of my eye look, and I really love how the mattes function in this palette. They do have the capacity to be like super, super pigmented, but they're very buildable, very blendable, and really easy to use. Another thing I would say about this is that I didn't experience hardly any fallout with this palette like I have experienced with Huda Beauty palettes in the past, and I think a lot of that is because it is just regular textures. It's not like a whole bunch of like wonky weirdness going on in it. Not that I don't like it, but it's not got that wonky weirdness to it. I do think that this worked well with or without a primer. I don't think that a primer necessarily helped it for like blendability or performance. I also don't think a primer helped it for longevity, and that these shadows lasted a good 10 plus hours without really any kind of significant fading, and without any significant creasing, and without any significant like movement of the eye look, with or without a primer. The shimmers in here I think are much darker than I would have preferred. I mean, even the lightest shimmer, this one here is the lightest shimmer. It's not dark necessarily, but it also packed into an eye look. It didn't give off enough color payoff, enough base payoff, and was just kind of more of a topper. It was a great inner corner highlight, a great brow bone highlight, because there was a level of transparency to its base. But that is the lightest one. So if I wanted a light shimmer on my eye, like I didn't really have one to choose from. This one even was a smidge bit darker than I would have liked it to be. Even though it doesn't really look like it in the pan, it is just, it's very like kind of grayish lavender taupey, and it made like what I thought might be a bright eye look a little bit more dingy and dark, which was fine. I did get along with this palette really well, but it was just a little bit deeper, even in the lighter section, than I thought it really truly needed to be. We could have done with a lighter shimmer. This one has a little bit of a jelly like texture to it. Really does perform really well as a topper, but not really well as an all over the lid shade. This shadow here, Avant Garde, was probably the worst for fallout. It got everywhere. But other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of fallout with any of the shadows, which I really appreciated. And this one here, I feel like had a little bit of a flip to it that makes it a little unusual for my collection. It's like this like dingy like purple with kind of like a red-ish flip to it. I don't know if you can see it, but it was so unique. And when I wore it with a lot of the colors in there, because not everything, you know, there's not really any red in this palette. So when I wore it with a lot of the colors in here, it didn't go quite as well. But when I wore it with some of the pinks, like the pinks that I have on my eye look today, it went so, so good. So I just wish there was a little bit more ruddiness to some of these shades in here. Now this one does look like it goes, but it appears more purple on the eye look than it does in here, or a little bit more pink. We all know Huda kind of sways to the pinkness, not to the redness, and it was beautiful. Don't get me wrong, I loved it. It was probably one of my favorite shades to mess with in this palette. But I didn't feel like it went very well with any of the other shades. It's called Haphazard. It's truly a unique, beautiful shadow that I'm so happy to have in my collection. It appears more duochrome than it does anything else, and I loved that for it. All of the shimmers work best with your finger because of just how they are. Now, two of them, the two that I showed you guys earlier, these two right here, work with your finger only. They're really difficult to pick up on a brush, but the rest of the shimmers also work very well with your finger. They work best with your finger if you want that like wham in your face, like impact. It's gonna come off with your finger the best, of course. They do pick up on a brush, but it's very, very minimal on a brush. And when I utilized this one with my finger over with a brush, like the fallout galore happened more with the brush application than it did with the finger application. The gloss in here, like I said, double duty, right? It does a lot for this palette. Putting it underneath an eyeshadow as a base really caused a lot of creasing with the eyeshadows that I didn't really notice when I was using the eyeshadows on their own. On its own and buffed out, it was truly a beautiful, like just really glossy, pretty eye. Until about 4 hours in, when you could really see like the creasiness of the shadow because it is a gloss. I don't know. I think that that's maybe the point of gloss eyeshadows, because they're not necessarily like a cream eyeshadow that's not supposed to budge once you get it on, right? It's a gloss. It's like putting Vaseline on your eyes, but this is much different than Vaseline. It's not nearly as salvy, you know, so it feels better than having a Vaseline on your eyes. But just be forewarned, yes, it works wonderfully as a base to help those shimmers stick, but those shimmers are going to crease within a few hours if you're using that as your base underneath. I just stuck with NYX glitter glue because it works the best. I would venture to say that this is probably my favorite Huda Beauty palette because of the lack of pressed glitters and because of just the truly beautiful color story that, I mean, listen, you could go really, really every day with this. It works for everyday office appropriate, but like I said, it can get really sultry and sexy, but also light and airy. I just love this palette. So I had a really great time with it. I was wondering if it was going to be a mistake taking it to FLC with me, but I truly, truly fell in love with it and got so many compliments on the eye looks that I was doing and felt really bad because, you know, Huda isn't carried at Ulta. I wish it was carried at Ulta, but to tell people what I was using on my eyes, it felt a little weird because I was at an event for Ulta Beauty. I love this. It's a limited edition palette. Now, limited edition means whatever it means to the brands when they bring them out. I would say that this would be a palette that I would recommend because it doesn't have the weird textures to it. It doesn't have the pressed glitters. It's more matte than it is shimmer, but it does have some really interesting shimmers in it. And again, you can go from day to night really, really quickly with that palette. Okay, in this palette and on the swatches you see before you, you see Liberty, which is a medium peachy pink matte. Heroine, which is a pale matte, yellowy, creamy, like peachy color. Avant-Garde, which is a deep brown shimmer. It's got silver and gold sparkles in it and was the one that I said I got the most fallout from. You see Renegade, which is a soft black matte finish, which can be sheared out to more of like a charcoaly gray. Brave, which is a reddish mauve tone. And then Beauty Chaos, which is a light-ish, dusty, like lavender shade. You see Rise Up. It's the next row down in the palette. Rise Up is a matte brown that is slightly peachy also. You see Stand Up, which is a light, like rose gold shimmer. Strong AF is a grayish, purpley shimmer. It's got silver and gold sparkles in it as well. Then there is Nirvana, which is a deep muted purple matte, kind of eggplanty. Then Haphazard, which is a gray base shimmer with red to purple shiftiness, which is the one that I said was really unique to my collection. Then you have Fearless, which is a deep, like ruddy brown that actually swings a lot more purple than it does red, to be honest, in an eye look, and it has a matte finish as well. Next row down in the palette, but moving right along in the swatches, we have Hope, which is a deep neutral brown matte. We have Love Anarchy, which is a light peachy mauve tone matte. Then you have Maverick, which is a metallic white gold, and it's got super fine shimmers and also has a creamier feel to it and is so much better with your finger. Doesn't pick up worth nothing on the brush and is more of a topper than anything else. Then we have Rebel or Rebelle, or I don't know exactly how to say it, but it is a really flaky gold lavender shimmer. Has a lot of large gold like flecks in it, as well as like a lavender glitter to it. This one is creamy to the touch, picks up easier on your finger, doesn't pick up for poop on the brush, and like I said, is a lot more flaky. Then you have Freedom, which is the a light matte pinky brown, kind of like a pinky taupe, but not super pink and not super brown. And then you have Grunge, which is the black glossy cream color. The next one is the Pat McGrath Mothership 10, I do believe, and this is the Moonlit Seduction palette. This is a $128 eyeshadow palette, which is twice what this is. And it has 0.68 ounces of product, so more than that one does, of course, but not much more, not twice more. And that means that each one of these pans, because there's only 10 pans of eyeshadow, we all know this, is 0.07 ounces of product each pan. So this is, of course, what it looks like, just about black lacquer box like any other Pat McGrath palette is. You guys can see everything in the reflection on there, and all of my fingerprints are all over this box. Look, we're gonna make it all fresh and new. Yes, there we go. Look at how beautiful that is. Of course, we've talked about this 1,000 times. This could truly be a weapon. The back of the palette, of course, is the gold bar, so it looks like a gold bar. What I would say I love about this one that I don't think I notice on any of my other Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes is this little sticker down here where it says this is the Mothership 10 Moonlit Seduction palette. My other palettes I have to keep in the box because I have no idea what their palette is, but of course it's metal, black lacquer box, metal backing. It has the Pat McGrath like symbols stamped into it here, and as always it says use without caution, shade throwing and eye ecstasy may result with prolonged use. It's on every single one of her palettes. And then it does say Mothership 10 Moonlit Seduction, and it has an 18-month shelf life. And of course you open it up, it does have the beveled mirror, it stands upright, it doesn't lean all the way back, and this is what the palette looks like. So these are the shades in the Moonlit Seduction palette, and they are stunning, stunning. And like all of her palettes, we have the 4 like special shades over here, and then the 6 like regular shades over here. I would say that this doesn't range any differently from many of her other palettes, but this one, for me, was one that I've had my eyeball on since it came out because of this shade right here. This is truly the star of the show. I mean, so beautiful. That red to copper to green, like flip. Listen, so pretty. Today on my eyes, I have this matte here and this shimmer here. And then this one right here worked so well as an inner corner. I used it as an inner corner almost every single day, and I'm using it today again. So it's just like 3 eyeshadows on my lids right now. besides the one that's in the Pretty Grunge, to buff out the upper lines there near my brow bone. I cannot with this eyeshadow palette. Like, in the past, I think I have come onto this channel and said, you know, preached about how little I thought of Pat McGrath's mattes. But this palette and the last palette I used by Pat McGrath, I really quite loved and enjoyed working with. And I do think that these mattes here in this palette are perfect for the shadows that are in this palette with them, because this like dual chromey shade kind of leans a little bit like coppery. It goes really pretty perfect with this shade and then this shade in the outer corner. I love this palette so much. It is, I would say, probably my favorite Pat McGrath palette. So imagine my dismay when I realized I had used every single shadow out of these two eyeshadow palettes and was like, oh, I have to do the palette roulette on them now. I think my least favorite is this one here. And I think it's just because it's very ho-hum. It's just a regular old like copper, and it's just not a shade that I wear very often. I mean, it's pretty, don't get me wrong. It's just not a shade that I wear very often. And besides the brown in this palette, it doesn't really go with everything else. Now this gold here, I don't know if you guys can see, but that is truly a gold, but it is so silky soft and smooth and buttery. Feels like it's a little bit like a silicone-y, but it is just a topper, and it is just so pretty. I was actually wearing it on my eye look yesterday while I was filming my deck of panning video. That's what was kind of packed onto the center of my lid, like a halo eye of sorts with the shadows that I did. But these two, this one here, is the same kind of formulation as that, more of a topper. It's just got a little bit more of like a silver or pinky white flip to it, and it's a little bit more subdued, I think, than the gold. Now, those two have a lot of glitter in them, so like when you wipe them off, when you wash them off, you're going to see some glitter residue. I look like Edward Cullen right now because my hand is shimmery in the light. These two are astral shades. This one is a Blitz Venus, and then this one is VR Sextasy. So those astral shades are a little bit more toppery and have a little bit more of a, or have a little bit less of an opacity to them than the Blitz shades do. This one here is what is on my eye look today, and it's really opaque and really beautiful and kind of like pinky rosy gold. So pretty. So these are buildable blendable mattes that I got along with quite well. I wasn't certain I was going to get along with the mattes because I don't typically get along with Pat McGrath mattes very well, but these ones I had no problems with. I think that part of the reason is because I've just learned how to maneuver Pat McGrath shadows. And that's okay. When I first came into the space, like, I didn't know what I was doing, right? And I bought a Pat McGrath palette before I knew what I was doing. So of course I was probably going to hate it. They are very, very pigmented. So my suggestion with the mattes, which are this one here, and this one here, my suggestion with the mattes, of course, is to pack it onto a brush and then pack it onto your eye and then blend it out with something else. Like, get it situated on your eye in the way that you want it to be situated and then blend it out with something else. I still don't think that her mattes necessarily blend super well, but they are blendable. They're not going to sheer out in any way. Like, legitimately, they are pigmentation in your face. It's a woman of color brand made for, you know, everybody, but specifically around making sure that that pigmentation is there. So it shows up also on women of color or people of color. They are very pigmented. The special shades are so buttery, so smooth, so like silky to the touch as always. And even the regular shimmers are very silky to the touch, very beautiful, not grippy. Even if they have glitter particles in it, you cannot feel that grippiness, and they last forever legitimately on an eye look. I would say they're best applied. The mattes are best applied over a primed dry eye. So if you're using a tacky base primer, you've sealed your fate and failure, or just over the top of bare skin. I don't think a primer necessarily helps with performance of them, longevity of them. So like truly utilizing them either over a really, really dry primer or bare skin is the best way to go. The shimmers, I would definitely use a glitter glue period over the top or underneath any of these shimmers, because otherwise you are going to see a significant amount of fallout, because that's just how her shimmers roll. Easy 10-hour wear time. And they don't really like transfer and move around, in my humble opinion. This palette will be super easy because there's only 10 shades here. First row, first shade, we have Skin Tense Glow. And Skin Tense Glow is a warm tone, really, really light white gold metallic. Perfect shade for an inner corner highlight or brow bone. Don't really love it all over the lid. It reminds me a lot of a lighter weight ColourPop Flexitarian. Then we have Rosewood Romantique. Rosewood Romantique is a warm tone, medium brown, but rose. It's one of 3 mattes in this palette. Platinum Dusk is a warm tone, dark, like pewter color with a metallic finish, definitely one of her normal shimmers. And it is actually quite stunning. Because it's pewter, it feels like it has a little bit of a green flip to it, but it really doesn't. Then we have my favorite in this palette, which is the VR Sextasy eyeshadow. It's a warm tone duochrome with, of course, a sparkly finish. It flips from like blue to like red to like silvery, maybe even pinky. It is, I guess, a brown base blue to purple, but I mean, truly extraordinary. Reminds me a lot of Solstice from the Urban Decay Moondust shadows, but definitely a lot more depth to this one, and definitely a little more stature to this one. Astral Gold Lust, as I explained when I swatched it for you guys earlier, is a warm tone medium dark gold with definitely a sparkle finish. It's a lot of little tiny microfine glitters in here, and it works much better as a topper than it does as an all over the lid shade. Then we have the second of the rows in the palette and the second matte in the palette, and this one is called Extreme Nocturne. It is a very cool tone dark taupe, really, really deep, like espresso brown, with a matte finish. And then we have the next one, which is Bronze Devotion. Bronze Devotion is not one that I used very often because I swatched it for you. It's got a little bit of that copperiness to it that it just didn't feel like went here in this palette. And it's a warm, light to medium brown, coppery, like almost orangey brown with a metallic finish, obviously. And then we have the last matte in the palette, which is called Plum Cabaret, and it is my favorite matte in this palette. It's a very cool tone, dark plum, like peachy plum, like raspberry, and is a matte, like I said, and the last one in this palette. Then we have Blitz Venus, which is a beautiful warm tone, dark peachy pink, kind of like a rose gold, metallic, very opaque, very like thick without feeling thick. Definitely has a lot of punch to it, a lot of shimmer to it. And then Astral Lilac Aura, the last shade in the palette, is a cool toned light lavender that kind of shifts silver and again has that sparkle finish that makes it more of a topper than anything else and doesn't really pick up on a brush, to be honest. It reminds me a lot of the How Many Carats by Fenty. That highlighter definitely gives you that wet look, but not really anything more than that. It's definitely shiny, definitely beautiful. I mean, if you're looking for opacity on your lid, this is not going to be the shade for you, but it is so pretty as a topper. I don't necessarily think that, you know, Pat McGrath is the end all speak all for special shadows. I do think that you can get better shadows in the indie space. I don't necessarily think this is worth $128, besides the fact that it comes in very luxe packaging. With that said, I do know that Pat McGrath has many a sale on her website, and you can pick these up a lot of times for 30 or 40% off, and I do think that that is fair for these palettes, specifically because of the amazing packaging that is lacquer. It's a lacquer box with a gold plate at the bottom. It's got a really great magnetic closure. This shade here is what is in my inner corner. I love this shade. I will continue to go back to that shade for inner corner. And the great thing about that shade for inner corner is sometimes it takes like spraying your brush or something for that intensity to stick to the eye. And there's enough of kind of like a malleable texture to that shade specifically that it just kind of stays there without like blending away or anything like that. Like I didn't put any kind of glitter glue, any kind of wetness to my brush, anything. It's just straight up that shade in my inner corner. I love it. Intense shimmery goodness in this palette for sure. It has 4.8 stars on Sephora with 291 reviews. I definitely would say that this would be a Pat McGrath palette that I would give a 4.8 star or more rate to. I just don't think that they're like, I honestly think that they're really overpriced for what you're getting, because there's only 4 special shades in there, whereas I know that I can get some really beautiful indie shadows or a full-on trio chrome multi-chrome like special shadow kind of palette from Danessa Myricks with so many more shadows in it, so much more product for less than this. So like, I do know that a portion of that is to pay for the packaging, but I'm not sure that I think that the packaging is worth it. In addition to that, I hate that you, for the most part, have to keep, yes, this is a piece of art, but I hate for the most part that you have to keep Pat McGrath's palettes in their cartridges, in their, you know, outer cartons. Because like it's just bulky and there's like a good like ½ inch on either side of extra room, and you know, when you're dealing with like space or whatnot, that's really rough, right? But in order to know what the shades are called, you have to keep the outer packaging, because the little pamphlet that has the shade names on it doesn't fit inside the palette. So, and they're not on the palettes. So I mean, it is what it is. They're giant shades, they're beautiful shades, and the artwork is gorgeous. So it is what it is. I would say that I love that palette. Now, would I refer somebody to purchase that palette? Probably not, because it's $128. But if there was a Pat McGrath sale going on the Pat McGrath website, I would absolutely say this is a palette that you need to pick up if you don't have it. I love it so much. I'm so happy to have it in my life. So with that said, I hope that you enjoyed the pictures and my rantings and ravings of the palettes, but I'm gonna go pick some new palettes. I will be right back. Okay, I'm kind of going back and forth on what I should do. I really want color, but I really think, and I really want to use these, but I really want also to So during the Sydney Grace Christmas in July sale last year, I bought the In Mel's Memory palette that actually didn't come in a palette. It's actually just, you know, all the singles for that palette. And I want to use that in conjunction with the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette, because I have used Retro Glam, but I used it in a Get Ready With Me, not in a palette roulette. And I want to see just how different they are and just what I prefer about them. And it is, you know, springtime, so it would be perfect. But I also kind of really want to use these because of, I mean, just look at the colors. Look at the colors. So maybe what I will do is we're going to use these next time. And I am going to utilize Natasha Denona and Sydney Grace. I'll be right back. Again. I don't know if I knew that this is how they came when I purchased them, but I have been wanting In Mel's Memory. I'll see if I can put her video up in here. Mel Thompson, who is a fantastic YouTuber who is no longer with us. I can't remember exactly how it all came out. This is a palette when I do think this palette came out first, right? This is the Natasha Denona mini retro palette, and it is beautiful, sagey green, kind of reminds me of like Lime Crime XXL. This is the first palette in the retro series that we got from Natasha Denona, I do believe. There were talks about them coming out with a midi palette that would pair well with that, and this is what we got. So when this came out, everybody was like, this doesn't go here. This and this are not of the same vein. So Mel Thompson, if I remember this all correctly, put together a palette with Sydney Grace that she called her makeshift retro midi palette, and this is the palette. Now, I didn't know that it came as singles. I thought that it came in a palette. That's totally okay, but this is currently with my other singles because I have nowhere else to put this. I need to get a Z palette specifically just for these shadows. I have a Z palette, but it only fits the first 3 rows. It doesn't fit the last row. So I need to get a Z palette specifically for these shadows. But this is my In Mel's Memory by Sydney Grace, which is the Mel Thompson version of the retro midi. So she came out with this, and then Natasha heard everybody say, she doesn't go here, and they came out with the Retro Glam. So the Retro Glam looks like this, and it is much more mini retro inspired, right? And, oh my God, I've got so much going on right now. And it is very similar to the In Mel's Memory. So what I want to do is utilize these two palettes in conjunction, like with each other, maybe not with each other, but separately to see how they compare to each other and bring that to you in my next palette roulette, palette review. I have done you can see that I've used some of the shades here. I have done a Get Ready With Me with this palette, but you can see there's a lot of non-use in this palette. So I haven't done a palette roulette with this palette. So I'm actually, and I paused on that because I wanted to use it in conjunction with this. And I think now is the perfect time because it is spring and these are spring colors, and I am actually really excited. So that is what we will be doing this time, and I hope that you guys are here for it. Next time we will definitely dig into the Melt Cosmetics Halloween stuff because I think these are, like, as I look at them, they're definitely more like summery shades in my humble opinion, even though they're Halloween shades. They're Halloween palettes. P.S. Did you guys see the new Melt palette that popular. I need it. I need it so bad. So with that said, that is what we are going to do for the next palette roulette. I do hope that you guys are here for it, and I hope that you'll want to subscribe so that you do not miss it. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I hope that you and yours are doing well. I hope that you are all safe and healthy and getting along as best you can. I hope that you are all enjoying some vitamin D coming from the sky. Lord knows we all need a little bit more vitamin D in our life. If you guys have utilized these two palettes, let me know your thoughts. If you guys have utilized those two palettes, let me know your thoughts. I would be interested to hear from you down in the comments section. So don't forget to hit me up down there. Y'all know I love to have conversations going on down there. I have been a little bit slacking on answering the comments that are in my comment pool right now, but I will get to them today, and I am still in a place where I answer every single comment. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I know that we have quite a few new subscribers to the channel, so that's exciting to me, and I just hope that we continue on in this journey. Yeah, just have an awesome day. Thank you guys so much, and until next time, bye friends.